Spoken word is poetry, but it has a really strong performance element to it, and that's basically what spoken word is. I suppose that because it's so performance based, there tends to be a lot more sort of energy that drives the recitation of the poetry, I suppose. But then again, you could just go to a normal poetry reading with somebody standing at a pulpit, and they still have to be able to read in an engaging way, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of difficult to make those distinctions between, say, page poetry and spoken word poetry. I mean, it's an ongoing debate, and you know, it's really hard even to talk in terms of there being a difference between spoken word and poetry, because in many instances there is absolutely no difference. You know what I mean? It's just poetry with the concentration on the performance aspect. Some people would call themselves performance poets, some people call themselves spoken word artists, some people use the two terms interchangeably because, I don't think any of us really know where the line exists between the two, if there even is a line. Like me, I would use the two terms interchangeably because some of the poetry that I write is not really made to be spoken or performed, and some of my spoken word pieces aren't really poetry, you know. I started performing spoken word in 2006, and I was doing my 6 months on the dole at the gas yard. You know, you have to do those 6 month back to work programs. So I got sent to the gas yard, and it just so happened at that time the Fela was on, and the guy Jim Collins running the Bluebell Arts Project at the time, there was a literary festival aspect to the Fela, which he asked me to help out with, and through that I met a woman called Pamela Brown. She come up with this idea that she wanted to do this project called the Poetry Chicks, and she approached myself and another writer from the town called Jenny Doherty and asked us if we'd like to be involved in this sort of performance poetry project. And at that time I didn't really have any performance poems, well, nothing that I would have considered to be a performance poem as such. So that's really how I got into it. I was kind of thrown in at the deep end there, and we had a gig coming up. I think it was part of the Fela at the gas yard. So I just sort of sat down and started writing. And the first one that I wrote in particular, it was really the first time that I experienced what artists talk about, and when they get taken over by this creative energy that feels almost like it's outside themselves, you know. So I sat down and I wrote this poem called Milk and Black Coffee, and on the first reading it was over 12 minutes long, you know. So I was like, right, okay, that's a wee bit too long. So I managed to just about half it in length, but it's still an epic.
When you were saying then, you know, you met this lady and that's how you got introduced to it, did you just take to it naturally? Like, was it like a duck to water? Did you think, right, this is me, this is what I've been searching for? Like, did you have any idea about what it was before?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I did, yeah. You know, I was a fan of spoken word before that, before I met her, but mainly I was listening to like good conscious rap and hip hop music, and that gave me a real appreciation of when things are done succinctly and cleverly and with a tight rhythm, you know, when you can put ideas across like that. I always loved that, you know. I'd always been writing poetry, but I never really saw myself sort of up there on a stage reciting it to people or performing it to people. So yeah, I suppose I did just kind of take to it like a duck to water, but that was because of my exposure to rap and hip hop at that time. Good rap and good hip hop. So I'm in the middle of starting to construct my first solo spoken word show. It's going to be called Fallen Fighters. So at the minute I'm putting together all of the pieces for that, all the poems and stomes. That's short story mixed with poems. I just made up that term myself.
And when you're writing now, like, do you have to be in the mood for it, or, you know, like, say like you know you've got a show coming up or whatever, Do you feel under pressure to think, right, got to write something, or is it just kind of just one of those things where it's so enjoyable where you can something comes into your mind and you're thinking, I want to write about that, and you get in the zone and you get in the flow?
Well, you know, that happens. That's a lot rarer than actually just having to sit down and go through the slog. Because even writing poetry, it's a bit of a long slog, and it's, you know, it's hard work. It's you know, you get those occasional times where you get sort of overcome by this creative energy that feels like it's coming from outside yourself, but that is rare.
Yeah.
That is a lot rarer than, in fact, I think for most artists or most young people hoping to go into an artistic career, I think that's something that we should all be impressing upon them at all times, is that it's maybe 5% inspiration and 95% slog.
Yeah.
I mean, I had writer's block for a long time. Some people say it doesn't exist, but I don't know. It definitely does for me anyway. I mean, I had writer's block for nearly 2 years there. In that whole time, I think I wrote 1 or 2 decent pieces and the rest were just all rubbish, you know.
Yeah.
They went into my folder on my computer that's called crap poems with usable bits.
You would kind of revisit them now and go, right, that was the dark.
And I'll revisit them and I'll just take lines and bits and bobs out of them. Those are just poems that aren't really working as a whole, you know. There's always usable lines and things you can rescue.
What kind of things is it you write about? Do you stick to like one particular kind of theme, or do you just go with the flow, or is there any hard and fast rules to yourself, like what you write about?
No, not really. I just tend to write about things that move me. I mean, when I was a little bit younger, I tended to write mostly about things that angered me. But now I just feel like a bit more of a calmer person. I don't feel like I react with anger to the world so much in general in my everyday life. You know, people often ask me for like a summary statement about what I write about, and I always found that really hard to answer. But then when I was going through the cringe-worthy job of reading through a lot of the things I'd written over the past 10 years to put this show together, then I realised actually what most of my poems are about is that they're a homage to our everyday struggles as human beings, you know, trying to be human in this rapidly evolving digital and violent world. And they're really homages to the struggle and to the fight and to the fall and to the rise, really. Yeah. That's the best way I can sum it up.
And that's what's important to you.
Yeah, I think at the moment, like the subject that has been most interesting to me is really human beings coming through this struggle. I mean, you know, especially given the political situation and everything in the world and in our country, you know, a lot of us kind of feel a bit beat. But I think it's so important to realise that is a stage and a phase that you have to go through, and sometimes it's a lot more sensible for you to retreat from the battlefield for a while, to regather your strength and come back from there. There's a line in Bob Marley's song called The Heathen, and really that's what I based the name of my show on. And the line is, rise up, fallen fighters, rise and take your stance again. 'Tis he who fight and run away lives to fight another day. And that really is like the core of what I've been writing, is that you're not down forever because you fell down, and you should never let anybody convince you that you should stay down, or that while you're falling down and while you need to take that time to recover, that you need to be up there fighting, because it's just not sensible sometimes, you know. Well, I think I'm just coming out now of quite a long period of illness, really, that just went on a lot longer than I thought it was going to go on. Really the past 4, maybe 5 years. So going through that process was a real eye-opener for me, I think. I've forgotten what it was like to be sort of stuck in that quagmire of feeling like you can do nothing and you can be nothing. And you actually, you know, when I was in the midst of it, I also didn't really care about much, you know. Yeah. But it was just part of the illness. You have to cling on to those positives when you're in that state of mind, because sometimes it can be the only option that you have, really. Yeah. So I run a spoken word event on the last Monday of every month upstairs in Sandino's bar, called the Monday Night Cure.
We learned to storytell while our mothers broke promises and ornaments and promises not to hurt themselves, girl. There will always be those who only want to focus on our grammar.
And that is an open mic, and we have, not every month, but most months we'll have a main act on as well. The open mic has just been going great guns. We've had a load of new readers, more and more new readers coming in every month, because we have a great merry band of audience members who come most months. And I think we've managed to strike a good balance between a night that is also good crack and a good fun atmosphere, as well as having a listening, respectful audience. The gigs are always busy, you know. For a Monday night, I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to work on a Monday night, but
it has.
Derry proved me wrong. It's worked great. So,
what advice would you give to, like, say, anybody who's interested in spoken word, and they know about it, they love it, they want to learn how to express themselves, they don't know how to get into it, they don't know where to start? Like, what advice would you give to people, to anybody who's thinking of trying it?
Well, I would say obviously listen to other spoken word artists, go to spoken word gigs. I'd say try and avoid watching too much American slam poets online if you're not from America especially. Try and keep your own accent. And yeah, just get out there and do as many open mics as you can, because that's really the way that you develop as a live performer as well as a writer. Because, you know, doing spoken word gigs, people like myself, we cut our teeth performing in noisy bars and at noisy festivals and in atmospheres that aren't sort of very reverent necessarily, you know, especially in the old days when we first started doing this, and not hellish many people were really interested in what we were doing. In fact, the people that came to the gig, we had to sort of drag them there, you know. It's a great way to hone your live performance skills and how to be with an audience, because you can't learn that from a book. And you can't even learn that from watching other people. You have to just keep getting up there and doing it. And you have to roll with the punches. So when you have a crap gig, or you feel like the audience just weren't feeling you, I mean, that still happens to me today. Sometimes I do gigs and I just don't feel like, you know, I really connected with the audience and things like that. It's always going to happen. But the more and more that you do it live yourself, the more and more your confidence will grow, and you'll be able to take those lows as well as the highs.
Now tell me about Lingo Slam. You just crowned winner of Lingo Slam.
Yeah, so that I won the Lingo Festival Poetry Slam this year. I won it last year as well. Yeah, last year I got to go to London and support Damien Dempsey. And this year I got to do an opening slot at the festival for Saul Williams. And then I get to go to London for St Patrick's Day and perform in Trafalgar Square to the St Patrick's Day crowds. That's like thousands of people. Yeah. Luckily enough, I have a few months to prepare my mind for that. Saul Williams is my spoken word hero, and he has been for years, and that's really the reason why I entered the slam this year, was because we got to do an opening slot for Saul Williams. There was 12 contestants, and the standard was really, really high. So I kind of had resigned myself halfway through to going, oh, well, I'm not going to win this, but I'm glad that I did it anyway. I would have been kicking myself if I didn't put myself in for it. And then when I won it, I was just, well, I suppose I was just really shocked. But I couldn't really speak, you know. So yeah, an amazing feeling. The absolute highlight of my career to date, doing an opening slot for Saul Williams and getting to hang out with him for a bit and buzzing for days.
Oh, aye. We know violence. It nurtured us like pups. Insisted our mothers give birth to us prostrate and in stirrups. Oh, we know violence. It slapped our arses into existence. Gifted our first and last breaths. Spoke in tongues when it taught us right from wrong in 1,000 different languages when all we knew was one, it was violence. Forbade us from pointing our fingers at what we didn't understand, or at the ones who stand accused. It saved the shame of our mothers. Taught some of us that pointing fingers could be guns or magic wands. Violence sometimes sings lullabies instead of rebel songs. wakes us up to a chorus of bombs in the digital morning and sends us out to war, hand on hearts to sing a song of subservience with nothing but the exaltation of the city of London in our souls. Or Israel, Washington, Vatican, Zion, the list goes on. It's hand on heart to sing a song of subservience, hand on heart to sing a song of subservience. Oh, we know violence. Every time we try to speak our native languages, every time we realise entire sections of our blood have been spattered to the four corners of some mythical land called diaspora, every time a girl leaves this city because she was raped by great connected men, every time Jimmy tells the story of being forcibly sedated and waking in another country entirely, every time I think I might best use my clenched fist to salute rather than break heads, I can feel the violence that I am, and it keeps breathing down my neck. Oh, I know violence. From the threadbare fabric of our fashion house homes to the sexy shells of Stockholm Syndrome. From our hallowed psychopathic representatives to images of pixelated kids without limbs to pick the American candy up off the street with. Oh yeah, we know everything there ever was to know about violence. But when they cast the final die, how many of us are going to know how to fight